Hello children and welcome to Study with Sudhir, your digital classroom. I hope you are subscribed to the channel because now we have more or less covered almost the entire chapter of ICSE Class 9 as well as 10, and today we are going to be looking at one of the few stories that are still left, and that is An Angel in Disguise by T.S. Arthur. T.S. Sudhir talking about T.S. Arthur's An Angel in Disguise. So you need to subscribe to the channel and also press on the bell icon so that you can get regular updates about whatever material we will be posting, and we'll be posting a lot of material about English grammar and also tips, important and very useful tips on how to do very well in the English literature as well as in the English grammar paper. So those are going to be very useful. So unless you press on the bell icon, you wouldn't know what we have posted on Study with Sudhir. This is the channel where you need to come to get a detailed and a very thorough analysis and explanation of what the lesson, the story and the poem is all about. So let's get started without wasting any time. I'll be going through the story. Since it's a long story, we are going to breaking it up into two parts so that it doesn't seem like one huge video lesson for you, and we'll be breaking it for you, the first part and the second part, which will also include the detailed explanation at the end. And of course we'll be reading through and I'll be explaining about the key words and about the emotion expressed in every sentence. This is a very emotional kind of a story about a little girl, but though we speak about the title An Angel in Disguise and we think that it's the little girl Maggie who is really the protagonist, the chief character of the story, to my mind it is Joe Thompson, who comes across as having a heart of gold, as well as his wife, who are the real positive characters carrying a positive message in this particular story. Why? We will tell you as we go along in this story. So let's start. Idleness. I hope you have the book in front of you, also a pen and paper, a pencil to mark the keywords and also to take down the detailed explanations that I'll be giving you in part 1 of An Angel in Disguise. Idleness, vice and intemperance had done their miserable work, and the dead mother lay cold and still amid her wretched children. Look at the words with which, the heavy words with which the story has begun. Idleness, vice. Vice means something which is not very immoral. And intemperance. Intemperance means an overindulgence, because this mother who had just passed away of 3 children was used to excessive drinking. So that's what is the word meant by the word intemperance. So idleness as in not doing anything, vice, immoral habit, and intemperance and overindulgence had done their miserable work, had actually taken their toll, had a negative effect on the mother. And the dead mother lay cold as in the dead body, and still amid her wretched children. Wretched in this meaning is not a negative phrase, but it essentially means children who are feeling miserable as a result of the demise, the death of their mother. She had fallen upon the threshold of her own door in a drunken fit, and died in the presence of her frightened little ones. Frightened little ones referring to the 3 children. Threshold as in the doorstep of her own door at the entrance to the house in a drunken fit when she was drunk. Death touches the spring of our common humanity. Now this is something which T.S. Arthur is saying, that death, when people die, people feel a little moved and they reach out in order to help. So death touches the spring of our common humanity, makes us kind of touch upon our very human values. This woman had been despised as in she was not liked, she was hated, she was despised, detested, scoffed at as in people making fun of her, or generally not saying very positive things about her, and angrily denounced by nearly every man, woman and child in the village. Denounced as in criticized. But now, as the fact of her death was passed from lip to lip, as people came to know by word of mouth, people telling each other that she had passed away, in subdued tones, because obviously death is not something which you celebrate or talk loudly about, you tell it in hush tones. Pity took the place of anger and sorrow of denunciation. So people were feeling more sympathetic about her and about, more importantly, about the 3 children that she had left behind. And there was a sense of sadness as well. Neighbors went hastily to the old tumble-down hut in which she had secured little more than a place of shelter from summer heats and winter cold. Old tumble down, something like a, a rundown kind of a dwelling, something which is not in great condition. Some with grave clothes for a decent interment of the body, because for the body obviously you need white clothes in order to be laid to rest in the grave. And some with food for the half-starving children, 3 in number. So some had also brought food for the children who were obviously hungry, who did not have much to food, because obviously the mother, since she seemed to have spent most of her money on drinking, on alcohol, she didn't have much money to feed her 3 hungry children. Of these, John, the oldest, a boy of 12. So the eldest boy was a son. He was 12 years old, was a stout lad, able to earn his living with any farmer. So we immediately get a description of the first child, that he's stout and he would be in a position to earn a living with any farmer. Kate, between 10 and 11, so she's about a year or two younger than John, was a bright, active girl out of whom something clever might be made if in good hands. But poor little Maggie, the youngest, was hopelessly diseased. So John and Kate are able-bodied and bright kids, 12 and between 10 and 11, Kate, and the youngest little Maggie was not in the same league because she was hopelessly diseased, hopelessly referring to a sense of suffering from an ailment which does not have any cure, which is almost incurable. So there is no sense of hope about the fact that she would turn for the better over a period of time. 2 years before, a fall from a window had injured her spine. So 2 years back, this is what the author is telling us, T.S. Arthur, that 2 years back Maggie had had a fall from a window, as a result of which her spine, that is the back of the body, had been severely injured, and she had not been able to leave her bed since, except when lifted in the arms of her mother. 2 things out here, 2 important points being revealed by T.S. Arthur in this particular sentence, that she had not left her bed for the last 2 years since she had had a fall from a window, except when lifted in the arms of her mother. So though so far we have been told only negative things about the mother who has passed away, in this one sentence T.S. Arthur gives a sense of maternal love, that she would kind of lift her youngest child, maybe to clean or to take her to the washroom, to help her change. So there was a sense of maternal love in a woman who was otherwise accused of idleness, vice and intemperance, and accused of drinking and not being very caring about her 3 children who had been left starving. But there was this one sentence gives us a sense of her maternal love, especially for Maggie. What is to be done with the children? That was the chief question now. So the neighbors were obviously, who had come to the house, to the old tumble down hut, were asking the question, what is to be done about the 3 children now? That was the chief question now. The dead mother would go underground and be forever beyond all care or concern of the villagers. Underground as in buried, and be forever, and after that obviously people will forget about her. But the children must not be left to starve. So there is unanimity that the children must not be left to starve. So that shows us something positive about the neighbors who till then had despised and scoffed at and publicly denounced the mother. After considering the matter and talking it over with his wife, Farmer Jones said that he would take John and do well by him now that his mother was out of the way. So the farmer Jones says that he would take John, who is an able-bodied boy of 12 years old, and he would take him. He has already discussed the matter with his wife even before he came to the old tumble-down hut. And since his mother is out of the way, which perhaps indicates that he had broached the subject with the mother. We do not know, but just the sentence, now that his mother was out of the way, kind of indicates that he had broached the subject with the mother in the past also. And Mrs. Ellis, who had been looking out for a bound girl, concluded that it would be charitable in her to make choice of Katie, even though she was too young to be of much use for several years. And Mrs. Ellis was looking out for a bound girl as in someone who would be with her and do the household work. So she wants to take Kate with her, even though she thinks that she would be too young, because after all she is just about 10 to 11 years old. I could do much better, I know, said Mrs. Ellis, but as no one seems inclined to take her, I must act from a sense of duty, except to have trouble with the child, for she is an undisciplined thing, used to having her own way. So she is not very approving of the ways of Kate. She thinks that she does not have much discipline. and she could have trouble with Kate, but nevertheless from a sense of duty and responsibility that she says on her own, she must take Kate with her. But no one said, I will take Maggie. So the two children are accounted for. Jones is going to take John and Mrs. Ellis is going to take Kate, but no one is talking about Maggie. Pitying glances were cast on her wan and wasted form, as in a pale and a very thin look. Wasted as in the body has obviously become very weak as a result of being confined to the bed all along. She doesn't have any physical exercise and she's all the time bedridden. So there is a sense of a very diseased and a very pale and a thin look as a result of that. Pitying glances were cast on her wan and wasted form, and thoughts were troubled on her account. Mothers brought cast-off garments, and removing her soiled and ragged clothes, dressed her in clean attire. The sad eyes and patient face of the little one touched many hearts, and even knocked at them for entrance, but none opened to take her in. Who wanted a bedridden child? Right? So the mothers had, the women in the neighborhood, they had brought out cast-off garments, that is old clothes, and they had removed her soiled and ragged clothes and dressed her in clean clothes. They did all the right work. They were also moved by the very sorrowful and very sad look on the face of Maggie. It also kind of, almost wanted to tell them that, take her also with you. But obviously none of them wanted to take someone who is so unwell and who is going to be completely bedridden. Take her to the poorhouse, said a rough man, of whom the question, what's to be Maggie, was asked. So someone has asked, oh, what do we do with Maggie? So take her to the poorhouse, says one rough man, obviously someone who is not soft-hearted in that sense or kind-hearted. Nobody's going to be bothered about her. So he passes his judgment saying that nobody's going to be bothered about Maggie. Take her to the poorhouse. Poorhouse is almost like an orphanage, where poor people who cannot fend for themselves, who cannot look after themselves, are kept and looked after. The poorhouse, and so it's in a very dismissive kind of a tone. Note the tone, dismissive kind of a tone, and that's what we know about the neighbors. So how the neighbors react is an important theme and component of the story which you should look out for. The poorhouse is a sad place for a sick and helpless child, answered one. So someone else who is obviously a little more kind-hearted than this rough man says that, well, the poorhouse is a very sad place for someone who is already very sick, right? Then another person says, for your child or mine. And this is extremely rude. He says, for your child or mine, well, yes, it would be a very, very sad place. But for this brat means someone who is not very well behaved. But for this brat, it will prove a blessed change. She will be kept clean, have healthy food, and be doctored, which is much more than can be said about her past condition. So again, two important points here. Will be doctored means that she did not get much medical attention. At least that's what the neighbors think. That's what the neighbors think, that she did not get good medical attention in the past when her mother was alive. So at least at the poorhouse, she will get medical attention. And number two, she will be kept clean. She will have healthy food at the poorhouse. So for this badly behaved child, it will be a good place to go to. There was reason in that, but still it did not satisfy. The day following the day of death was made the day of burial. That is, she was buried the following day. A few neighbors were at the miserable hovel, but none followed dead cart as it bore the unhonored remains to its pauper grave. Hovel essentially refers to the hut which we have already spoken about, the old tumble down hut. But none followed the dead cart as it bore the unhonored remains. Unhonored remains is the dead body, which obviously was not seen as belonging to someone who was very honorable when she was alive. To its pauper grave as in it was the grave of someone who had died a pauper. Farmer Jones, after the coffin was taken out, placed John in his wagon and drove away. So John is taken away by Farmer Jones, satisfied that he had done his part. So he is feeling good that he has done good too, as far as John is concerned, and to the family at large. Mrs. Ellis spoke to Kate with a hurried air. Bid your sister goodbye. So she's very dismissive and very curt in that sense. C-U-R-T, curt. She says, bid your sister goodbye, and drew the tearful children apart before scarcely their lips had touched in a sobbing farewell. So she does not even give Kate and Maggie time to embrace each other perhaps, or to bid each other a proper farewell, because two biological sisters are being parted by Mrs. Ellis. Hastily, other others went out, some glancing at Maggie and some resolutely refraining from a look. Now, resolutely refraining from a look because they do not want to feel moved, because already some of them have been feeling moved as a result of Maggie's medical condition when they were changing her clothes and feeding her. So, they do not want to look at her in the eye and feel moved all over again. So, she was alone until all had gone. She was alone. Just beyond the threshold, that is just beyond the door, Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, paused. A wheelwright is someone who deals with wheels in the sense that he is someone who repairs wheels and wagons, some kind of, you can call him a carpenter of sorts, someone who deals with wheels of different kind of carriages and stuff like that. The wheelwright paused and said to the blacksmith's wife, who was hastening with the rest, right? It's a cruel thing to leave her so. He says it's a cruel thing to leave Maggie all alone like this in this hovel, in this hut. Then take her to the poorhouse. She'll have to go there, answered the blacksmith's wife, springing away and leaving Joe behind. She says, then take her to the poorhouse. For a little while, the man stood with a puzzled air. Then he turned back and went into the hovel again. Maggie, with painful effort, had raised herself to an upright position and was sitting on the bed, straining her eyes upon the door out of which all had just departed. A vague terror had come into her thin white face. So, Joe Thompson is now puzzled. He doesn't know. He's the last to leave. He's the last person at the hut. So, he doesn't want to leave Maggie like that because he thinks it's a cruel thing to leave her like that. But he's the last person to leave. So, what does he do now? He can't leave her alone. So, he's puzzled. He's confused what to do. And then he turns back and goes back into the hut. And Maggie, upon realizing that Joe Thompson has come back, she makes an effort and sits up on the bed with a little bit of discomfort and effort. And she's straining her eyes upon the door out of which everyone else has departed. And a vague terror. Now, what is a vague terror? A vague terror is she's feeling very doubtful as to what is going to happen to her. Is she going to be left alone in this hut with nobody to look after her, given the fact that she needs someone to do just about anything, right? To change her clothes, to go to the washroom, she cannot do without any help. So she's terrified. So vague terror is an uncertain sense of feeling fearful, right? She's feeling fearful. Oh, Mr. Thompson, she cried out, catching her suspended breath. Don't leave me here all alone. So she makes a plea to Mr. Thompson saying that do not leave me alone out here. Though rough in exterior, Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, had a heart. Though he looks, because of the nature of his profession, because of what he did for an occupation, and because of his general demeanor and the way he was built, he looked like a rough man. But he had a heart. He had his heart in the right place. He had a soft heart. And it was very tender in some places. He liked children and was pleased to have them come to his shop, where sleds and wagons were made or mended for the village lads without a draft on their hoarded sixpences. So, free of cost, without a draft on their hoarded sixpences, which means children would save some money and they would save about sixpences which they could give to the wheelwright to get something repaired, but without charging a single penny. He would do it free of cost, any kind of small work. Either their wheels with which they were playing or anything of the sort, he wouldn't charge anything to those young lads. So essentially to show that he loved children. No dear, he answered in a kind voice, going to the bed and stooping down over the child. You shall not be left here alone. So he bends down in order to pick her up and said, you shall not be left here alone. Then he wrapped her with the gentleness almost of a woman. Now, a woman is someone who is deemed to be more gentle than a man, traditionally. So it's almost with the body language of a woman and the care and tenderness usually associated with a woman, that he picks up the child in the clean bedclothes which some neighbor had brought, and lifting her in his strong arms, bore her out into the air and across the field that lay between the hovel and his home. So there was a field that was between this hut and his home. So he started walking across the field. Now, Joe Thompson's wife, who happened to be childless, was not a woman of saintly temper. So she was given to some kind of, she was not someone of, she was not of a very pleasant kind of a temperament, and they didn't have any children. So probably that's one reason why he also loved children, nor much given to self-denial for others' good. And Joe had well-grounded habits, touching the manner of greeting he should receive on his arrival. So Joe Thompson's wife, he knew, was not known to be very pleasant, and they were childless, nor given to self-denial for others' good. So she would not kind of sacrifice herself or put herself to misery for the sake of other people. And Joe had well-grounded doubts touching the manner of greeting he should receive on his arrival. So he was very doubtful about the kind of reception, the kind of feedback, or the kind of in the manner in which she would react, the kind of reaction she would give when he arrived at their home with the child, with Maggie. Mrs. Thompson saw him approaching from the window and with ruffling feathers met him a few paces from the door. So she stepped out of the door because she saw him carrying Maggie. As he opened the garden gate and came in, he bore a precious burden. It's an important phrase, a precious burden. Now, a burden is normally not seen as precious. It's seen as some kind of a weight, something which will bear you down. But in this case, this is the phrase which kind of immediately relates to the title of the story, An Angel in Disguise. This is the first time the author is telling you, T.S. Arthur, that she is a precious burden. She will be a burden because of her medical condition, but she will be a precious burden. So this is the closest that we have come to the author telling that this is girl who is going to be an angel in disguise as far as the Thompsons are concerned. So please mark this phrase, a precious burden, and please use it in your answers. And he felt it to be so. So Joe Thompson is feeling very good about this precious burden that he is carrying in his arms. As his arms held the sick child to his breast, a sphere of tenderness went out from her and penetrated his feelings. A bond had already corded itself around them both, and love was springing into life. So he was already feeling that there was some kind of a bond that was beginning to be formed between him and Maggie. He uses the words that you need to underline. The sick child to his breast, a sphere of tenderness, a sphere of tenderness, precious burden, a sphere of tenderness went out from her and penetrated his feelings. So he is feeling an extreme sense of paternal love, a father's kind of love for little Maggie. What have you there? Sharply questioned Mrs. Thompson. Joe felt the child start. So the sharp tone in which Mrs. Thompson asked Joe, what have you there, startles, surprises, kind of shocks Maggie. Joe felt the child start and shrink against him. So you see the kind of bond that is forming between Joe Thompson and Maggie. He did not reply except by a look that was pleading and cautionary. So he doesn't say anything, but he kind of, with a facial expression, almost is pleading at the same time, and also kind of telling her to just be a little mild at this point in time. And that said, wait for a moment for explanations and be gentle. Just wait. I'll tell you, and be gentle. Don't be sharp, because her tone is very sharp. What have you there? Is a sharp tone, as a result of which Maggie shrinks against Joe, who is carrying her. And passing in, carried Maggie to the little chamber on the first floor and laid her on a bed. Then stepping back, he shut the door and stood face to face with his vinegar-tempered wife in the passageway outside. Now, vinegar, if you're familiar with it, vinegar has an extremely bitter kind of a taste. It's a kind of a funny kind of a taste. So, the temperament of Mrs. Thompson is also described as something which is not very, very pleasant. So, he puts Maggie inside the chamber on the first floor, put her on the bed, and then comes out and then confronts his wife. You haven't brought home that sick brat. Anger and astonishment were in the tones of Mrs. Joe Thompson. Her face was in a flame. So she was obviously extremely angry that he had brought home a sick child. I think women's hearts are sometimes very hard, said Joe. Usually Joe Thompson got out of his wife's way or kept rigidly silent and non-combative when she fired up on any subject. It was with some surprise, therefore, that she now encountered a firmly set countenance and a resolute pair of eyes. So you are getting a sense of the kind of relationship the Thompsons shared with each other, Joe Thompson and his wife. Usually he would always keep out of her way. He wouldn't kind of get into any kinds of arguments with her because he knew her to be of a vinegar temperament. He would keep silent and he would be non-combative. So therefore, therefore it was with some surprise that Mrs. Joe Thompson found for the first time perhaps that Joe was a little more resolute, almost determined that he is going to have Maggie in that house. And he tries to also tell her that women's hearts are sometimes very hard, basically telling her that her heart was not soft, at least as far as Maggie was concerned, in contrast to an extent to the other neighbor women who had actually come with clean clothes and fed her and were actually feeling a little bad to have left her behind, but obviously not in a position to take her home. Women's hearts are not as so hard as men's, she replies. Joe saw by a quick intuition that her resolute bearing had impressed his wife, and he answered quickly and with real indignation. Be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sick child's face, and when the cart went off with her dead mother, hurried away and left her alone in that old hut with the sun not an hour in the sky. So it's around what, an hour before sunset, which is about 5:30 is when all the children have left. It's going to be dark, it's going to be dusk, and he is not obviously approving of the women who have just left the little child without bothering about the fact that they were leaving her all alone in that hut while it's just going to be dark. Where were John and Kate? Asked Mrs. Thompson. Farmer Jones tossed John into his wagon. Tossed kind of indicates a certain level of roughness, a rough approach with which Farmer Jones has taken John into his wagon and drove off. Kate went home with Mrs. Ellis, but nobody wanted the poor sick one. Send her to the poorhouse was the cry. So he's briefing her about what really happened at the hovel. Why didn't you let her go then? What did you bring her for? So she's sharp. She's not approving of the fact that she did not send her to the poorhouse and that he has brought her home. She can't walk to the poorhouse, said Joe. Somebody's arms must carry her, and mine are strong enough for that task. So he says obviously she is not in a position to walk to the poorhouse on her own. Somebody has to carry her, and my arms are pretty strong to do that. Then why didn't you keep on? Why did you stop here? Demanded the wife. So she's pretty sharp. She's not moved by what Joe has told her or the kind of sarcastic remark that he has passed right at the beginning, that women's hearts are sometimes very hard. She wants to know, why didn't he take her directly to the poorhouse? Why has he brought her to their home? Because I'm not apt to go on a fool's errand. Fool's errand is essentially something which you go without knowing about whether you will be successful or not, but you just embark on that task. The guardians must first be seen and a permit obtained. So he obviously wants to get the permission of the people who run the poorhouse and only then take Maggie there. There is no gainsaying this. When will you see the guardians? So now she goes on to the next question, now that she doesn't have an answer to that. Was asked with irrepressible impatience. Impatience indicating that she doesn't want Maggie in the house. She's impatient to see her out of the house. So there is an irrepressible, and she does not even make an attempt to keep it down or to hide it in any way. Tomorrow, he says. Why not? Why put it off till tomorrow? Go at once for the permit and get the whole thing off your hands tonight. So she wants it to be done immediately. Pronto. She wants him to get the permission from the guardians tonight so that she can be deposited at the poorhouse the same evening, the same night, instead of him putting it off to the next day. Jane, said the wheelwright with an impressiveness of tone that greatly subdued his wife. Jane is the name of the wife. So she's Jane Thompson, but mostly referred to as Mrs. Thompson in this particular story. I read in the Bible sometimes and find that much said about little children, how the Savior rebuked the disciples who would not receive them, how he took them in his arms and blessed them, and how he said, whosoever gave them even a cup of cold water should not go unrewarded. Now it's a small thing for us to keep this poor, motherless little one for a single night, to be kind to her for a single night, to make her life comfortable for a single night. Two things here. One, it shows that he's a God-fearing man. He knows the Bible, so he's quoting from the Bible in order to tell Jane Thompson, his wife, that they must be good Christians. So it also shows that he believes that by quoting from the Bible, he would be able to convince Jane Thompson, his wife, to keep Maggie for a night. The second point is the emphasis on single night. He uses the phrase 3 times that they must keep her for a single night so that she can be comfortable out there. The voice of the strong, rough man shook, and he turned his head away so that the moisture in his eyes might not be seen. Mrs. Thompson did not answer, but a soft feeling crept into her heart. So that had the desired effect. that she seemed to be softening a bit as a result of him saying that it will be a single night, and number two, quoting from the Bible and basically imploring her, basically telling her that they needed to be good Christians. Look at her kindly, Jane. Speak to her kindly, said Joe. Think of her dead mother and the loneliness, the pain, the sorrow that must be on her coming life. The loneliness, the pain and the sorrow. So he's basically using the emotional card with his wife because he also feels it very strongly. It is not a put on by Joe Thompson. He's feeling the pain, the sorrow of the child, the loneliness of the child, and he wants his wife also to feel the same. And think of her dead mother, and the softness of his heart gave unwanted eloquence to his lips. So as a result of all the sorrow that he was feeling, it brought in great degree of eloquence to his lips that he was able to articulate it very, very well. So we'll pause out here in part 1 of this explanation of the story An Angel in Disguise. In part 2, we'll continue the rest of the story and also give a detailed explanation of what are the different themes of this particular story by T.S. Arthur, An Angel in Disguise.